December 4th, 2024. At 6:44 in the morning, Manhattan, New York City, outside the Hilton Midtown Hotel on 6th Avenue. Brian Thompson, 50 years old, CEO of UnitedHealthcare, the largest health insurance company in America. 2. Walking alone to an investor conference. A man in a hooded jacket approaches from behind, raises a pistol fitted with a silencer, fires multiple shots. Thompson falls to the sidewalk. The shooter calmly walks away, then breaks into a jog, disappears into Central Park on an electric bike. The entire assassination captured on surveillance cameras. Premeditated, calculated, but executed in broad daylight in one of the most surveilled cities in the world. A CEO murdered on a Manhattan street, and America watched in shock. This is not a random act of violence, not a robbery gone wrong, not a crime of passion. This is an assassination planned for weeks or possibly months. The shooter knew where Thompson would be, knew when he would arrive, knew he would be alone, brought a weapon designed for stealth, left messages at the scene. Words written on bullet casings: deny, defend, depose. Terms used to describe insurance company tactics. This was a message killing, political violence, an attack on corporate America. And the man who pulled the trigger. His name is Luigi Nicholas Mangione, 26 years old, Ivy League educated, from a prominent Baltimore family, Valedictorian. Computer science graduate. Someone who, by all appearances, had everything, who threw it all away to kill a man he had never met, because of an ideology, because of rage, because he believed the healthcare system deserved punishment. Brian Thompson was born in 1974 in Iowa. Grew up in the Midwest, attended the University of Iowa. Studied business, started his career in healthcare management in the 1990s, joined United Health Group in 2004, rose through the ranks steadily, became CEO of UnitedHealthcare in 2021. In 2021, the largest health insurance division of United Health Group. Overseeing coverage for more than 49 million Americans. A massive responsibility. Managing a company with over $280 in annual revenue. He was paid approximately $10 per year. Stock options, bonuses, executive compensation packages, the typical CEO wealth. And with that wealth came scrutiny, criticism, anger from people who felt insurance companies put profits over patients. Thompson lived in Minnesota with his wife and 2 sons, separated from his wife, but still married. By accounts, he was a private person. Not flashy, not controversial in his public statements. He focused on business operations, on profits and growth, on shareholder value. But UnitedHealthcare, under his leadership, faced criticism, high claim denial rates, delayed authorizations, prior authorization, requirements that frustrated doctors and patients. Stories of people denied life-saving treatments, families bankrupted by medical bills, despite having insurance. And Thompson, as CEO, became the face of those decisions, the symbol of a system many Americans despise. He received threats. Security concerns had been raised, but he continued his work, traveled to New York for the investor conference, walked alone that December morning, and paid for it with his life. The manhunt began immediately. NYPD mobilized hundreds of officers. FBI joined the investigation. Surveillance footage showed the shooter, masked, hooded, professional in his movements. He had waited for Thompson specifically, let other people pass, fired at Thompson only, used a weapon that appeared to jam between shots. Yet, he cleared the jam efficiently, continued firing. Hit Thompson multiple times in the back and leg. The bullets told a story. Shell casings found at the scene had words engraved on them: deny, defend, depose. Manhunt Sierra to autonomy, depose. Clearly referencing insurance industry practices, the 3 Ds used by critics to describe how insurers avoid paying claims. This was not just murder. This was a statement, an execution with a message. And investigators knew they were looking for someone with a grudge, someone ideological, someone who saw themselves as delivering justice. Luigi Mangione. Nicholas Mangione, Montgomery, Boistea, Lia Tentorta, born May 6th, 1998. 26 years old at the time of the shooting. Born into wealth and privilege. His family owns Lorien Health Services, a nursing home and assisted living company in Maryland, country club members, real estate holdings. His grandfather, Nick Mangione, was a successful real estate developer and philanthropist in Baltimore. Luigi grew up in Towson, Maryland, attended the elite Gilman School, an all-boys prep school where tuition exceeds $30,000 per year. He was brilliant academically, valedictorian of his class, well-liked by teachers and peers, involved in robotics, computer programming, model, and the kind of student who seemed destined for success. In 2016, Luigi enrolled at the University of Pennsylvania, an Ivy League institution, one of the most prestigious universities in America. He studied computer science and engineering, graduated in 2020 with both bachelor's and master's degrees. His thesis focused on cooperative robotics. He was active in campus life, joined a fraternity, participated in video game communities. Photos from his college years show a friendly, smiling young man, fit, attractive, socially engaged. After graduation, he moved to Hawaii, worked remotely in tech, lived in a co-living space called Surf Break, surfed, Cambyses, and then go knife, a devil, and tea, and tie tour. The surf day, hiked, D, appeared to be living the dream. a young tech professional in paradise. But something was wrong. Something was changing inside him. In 2022 and 2023, Luigi began experiencing severe back pain, chronic pain that affected his daily life, his ability to work, his relationships. He discussed surgery, posted online about spinal issues, shared x-rays showing hardware in his spine. He had undergone spinal fusion surgery, the kind of procedure that can go wrong, that can leave patients worse off than before. And there are indications his surgery did not go as planned, that he continued suffering, that he became increasingly frustrated with the medical system, with insurance companies, with the cost of care, with the hoops patients must jump through, and this personal experience with healthcare. This physical and financial pain appears to have radicalized him, transformed him from a privileged Ivy League graduate into someone who believed violence was justified, who saw CEOs like Brian Thompson as legitimate targets. In early 2024, Luigi cut off contact with family and friends, stopped responding to messages. His mother reported him missing in November. She couldn't reach him, didn't know where he was. Friends tried to find him. No one had heard from him in months. He had essentially vanished. And during those months, he was planning, researching, researching, preparing for an assassination. He traveled from Hawaii to New York, or possibly he had been on the East Coast already. Investigators are still piecing together his movements. But what is clear is that he knew Brian Thompson's schedule, knew about the investor conference, knew Thompson would be at the Hilton that morning. This required surveillance, planning, commitment, chasing, This was not impulsive. This was calculated murder. Luigi's online presence revealed his ideology. He engaged with content critical of healthcare companies, of insurance practices, of corporate greed. His Goodreads account showed he read books about chronic pain, about the failures of American healthcare, about anti-capitalist philosophy. Ed Kaczynski, Chedsanan, the Unabomber. Luigi had written a review praising aspects of Kaczynski's manifesto, calling it prescient, saying violence might be necessary to create change. Warning signs were there. Digital breadcrumbs showing radicalization. But no one connected the dots. No one knew Luigi was transforming from critic to killer, that his back pain and his anger at the healthcare system would lead him to Manhattan, to wait outside a hotel, to assassinate a CEO in cold blood. The weapon he used was likely a ghost gun, a homemade or assembled firearm without serial numbers, untraceable, the kind of weapon increasingly common in crimes. The silencer suggested sophistication, planning, knowledge of firearms. The messages on the bullets showed premeditation, ideology. This was not someone who snapped. This was someone who believed he was striking a blow against a corrupt system, who saw himself as a revolutionary, a hero, someone delivering justice that the legal system would not deliver. And after the shooting, as Luigi fled into Central Park and disappeared, a significant portion of the American public, particularly on social media, began expressing not horror, but support, sympathy, even celebration. I'm sorry, going to celebration. And this reaction, this cheering for a murderer, revealed something dark about America in 2024. For 5 days, Luigi Mangione was the most wanted man in America. The NYPD released surveillance images. A person of interest, smiling in what appeared to be a hostel. Surveillance footage from a taxi, from the shooting scene, from his escape route, his face partially visible despite the mask. The images went viral. Millions of Americans saw them. Someone would recognize him, or so investigators hoped. They tracked his movements backward. He had stayed at a hostel on the Upper West Side, used a fake ID, paid it in cash, kept to himself, arrived in New York days before the shooting, had been stalking Thompson, learning his patterns, waiting for the perfect moment. Luigi fled New York after the shooting, took a bus. Investigators believe he went to Pennsylvania. He moved carefully, avoided cameras when possible, changed his appearance. But he made mistakes. Or perhaps he wanted to be caught. Perhaps the ideology that drove him to kill also demanded that he be captured, that he face trial, that he spread his message from a courtroom. On December 9, 2024, 5 days after the murder, Luigi walked into a McDonald's in Altamona, Pennsylvania. A small city about 280 miles west of New York. An employee recognized him from the wanted posters, called police. Officers arrived, approached Luigi, asked for identification. He provided a fake New Jersey ID, the same ID he had used at the hostel. Officers were suspicious, searched him, and found the evidence. In Luigi's backpack, they found a ghost gun, consistent with the weapon used in the shooting, a silencer, ammunition, multiple fake IDs, and a manifesto, a handwritten document, 3 pages, explaining his actions, railing against the healthcare industry, against insurance companies, against corporate greed, calling Thompson's murder necessary, saying he acted alone, that this was a symbolic strike, a message to America. The document was not the rambling of someone insane. It was coherent, ideological, calculated, the writing of someone who believed deeply that what he had done was right, was justified, was heroic. God is heroic. Officers arrested him immediately, charged him with gun violations in Pennsylvania. While New York prepared murder charges, Luigi did not resist, appeared calm, almost relieved. The waiting was over. Luigi's arrest shocked people who knew him. His family released a statement expressing devastation and confusion. Friends from Penn couldn't reconcile the Luigi they knew with the man accused of assassination. Classmates remembered him as kind, smart, abundant, not violent. not extreme. I don't see maybe busy. But online communities that had followed the case erupted. Some with celebration. GoFundMe pages appeared trying to raise money for his defense. Social media posts called him a hero, a martyr, someone who stood up to corporate America. Merchandise with his face appeared. T-shirts. Why? Mon. Stickers. Free Luigi hashtags trended. A cult of personality formed around an accused murderer. And this reaction horrified many Americans, including Thompson's family, his widow and sons, who were grieving, who had lost a husband and father, and were now watching people celebrate his killer. The legal process moved quickly. Pennsylvania charged him with gun violations, forgery for the fake IDs. New York filed murder charges, first-degree murder, second-degree murder, armed weapons charges. Luigi was held without bail. Extradition hearings began. His lawyer indicated he would fight extradition, would challenge the evidence, would argue he was innocent. But the evidence against him was overwhelming. The gun matched. The manifesto was damning. Surveillance footage placed him at the scene. Witnesses had seen him. His digital footprint showed planning and intent. Prosecutors believed they had a strong case. That conviction was likely. That Luigi Mangione would spend the rest of his life in prison. But the question remained, why? Why? Why did a wealthy, educated, privileged young man throw away his life to kill someone he didn't know? And what did his actions say about America, about healthcare, about violence, about the rage simmering beneath the surface of society? The public reaction to Brian Thompson's murder was unlike anything seen in recent memory. Typically, when someone is killed, particularly in such a brutal public manner, there is universal condemnation, sympathy for the victim and family, calls for justice. But in this case, something different happened. On social media platforms like X, TikTok, Reddit, and Instagram, thousands of people expressed support for Luigi Mangione, called him a hero, said Thompson deserved what happened, that CEOs who profit from denying healthcare claims had it coming. Comment sections filled with stories. Personal experiences. People whose claims were denied, who lost loved ones because treatment wasn't approved, who went bankrupt from medical debt despite having insurance. And these people saw Luigi not as a murderer, but as someone who finally fought back. The phrase, delay, deny, defend, became a rallying cry. These are the tactics insurance companies allegedly use to avoid paying claims. Delay the process, deny the claim, defend against appeals. Luigi had written deny, defend, depose on his bullets, a variation on this theme, and the symbolism resonated. People shared statistics. UnitedHealthcare's claim denial rate, approximately 32% of claims denied according to some reports, double the industry average. Stories of people denied cancer treatments, of diabetics denied insulin, of families crushed by medical debt. And Brian Thompson, as CEO, became the symbol, the face of this suffering. Whether fair or not, He represented a system millions of Americans despise. A system where profits come before people, where shareholders matter more than patients. But many Americans were horrified by the support for Luigi, condemned it as dangerous, as glorifying political violence, as crossing a line that cannot be uncrossed. Thompson was a human being, a husband, a father. He didn't write insurance policy. He didn't personally deny anyone's claim. He was a CEO doing a job, and murdering him solved nothing, changed nothing, made nothing better. It was senseless violence, terrorism, born to die, an act that should be condemned universally. And yet the fact that so many people cheered, that Luigi became a folk hero to some, revealed deep problems, deep anger, deep frustration with American healthcare, with corporate power, with inequality, problems that violence will not solve, but that clearly demand attention, demand reform. Clearly, demand change. The media coverage was intense and divisive. Some outlets focused on Thompson as victim, on his family's grief, on the horror of assassination. Others examined the healthcare system, the legitimate grievances people have, the failures that drive desperation. Some commentators warned that celebrating Luigi would inspire copycats, that political violence against CEOs and leaders would escalate, that we were entering dangerous territory. Others argued that when peaceful means of change fail, when corporate power is unchecked, when people suffer and die because of profit-driven decisions, violence becomes inevitable. Not justified but predictable, a pressure valve releasing when the system provides no other outlet. And this debate, this division, shows how fractured America has become, how different our understandings of justice, of violence, of acceptable responses to injustice. Politicians mostly condemned the killing, but some struggled with how to address the underlying issues. Progressive politicians called for healthcare reform, for single-payer systems, for ending for-profit insurance, for accountability for companies that deny necessary care. Conservative politicians focused on law and order, on condemning violence on protecting business leaders. But neither side could ignore the groundswell of public support for Luigi. The fact that crowdfunding for his defense raised tens of thousands of dollars in hours, that Free Luigi became a movement, that his mugshot became iconic, printed on merchandise, turned into memes. This wasn't just about one murder. This was about rage, about people feeling powerless in a system that doesn't care about them. And Luigi, for better or worse, became a symbol of that rage. A figure who did what millions fantasize about, but never do. Who struck back? Who made the powerful afraid? Luigi Mangione's trial will likely take place in 2025 or 2026. New York will prosecute him for first-degree murder, a charge that carries life in prison without parole. The evidence is overwhelming. Surveillance footage, the weapon, the manifesto, witnesses, digital records, his own words. Conviction seems nearly certain. His defense team will have limited options. They might argue insanity, that chronic pain and surgery complications drove him to temporary insanity, that he was not in control of his actions. But the manifesto undermines this. It shows planning, ideological motivation, awareness of right and wrong. Another option is jury nullification, that jurors, sympathetic to his cause or angry at healthcare companies, refuse to convict despite the evidence. This is unlikely but not impossible. Given public sentiment, finding impartial jurors will be challenging. The trial will be a spectacle. Media from around the world will cover it. Luigi will become even more famous or infamous. His courtroom statements will be broadcast and analyzed. The manifesto will be read in full. His ideology will be debated, and he will likely use the platform to spread his message, to indict the healthcare system, but to justify his actions. He won't express remorse. He will double down, paint himself as a revolutionary, a martyr for a cause, and some people will believe him, will see him as brave, as someone who sacrificed his freedom to strike a blow against injustice, while others will see him as a deluded killer, a privileged young man who threw away his advantages to commit murder. Who could have used his intelligence and resources to create real change, but chose violence instead? The case raises difficult questions about political violence and when, if ever, it is justified. Throughout history, violence has been used to achieve political and social change. The American Revolution was violent. The Civil War, the Civil Rights Movement saw violence on all sides. Revolutions are inherently violent, but in a democracy, there are supposed to be non-violent means of change. Elections, protests, advocacy, reform, right? And when those means are exhausted or seem futile, does violence become acceptable? Most people would say no, that murder is never justified, that taking a life, regardless of grievance, is wrong. But some would argue that when systems kill people through neglect and greed, when corporations profit from suffering, when peaceful change is impossible, violence becomes inevitable. Not right, but understandable, a natural consequence of injustice. Luigi Mangione is not the first person to commit violence for ideological reasons. Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, killed in the name of his anti-technology philosophy. Timothy McVeigh bombed a federal building to protest government overreach. Political assassinations have targeted presidents, civil rights leaders, abortion doctors, police officers. Each killer believed they were justified, that they were fighting evil, that their victims deserved death, and society has mostly rejected these justifications, has condemned the violence even when sympathizing with some underlying grievances. But Luigi's case is different because the sympathy is so widespread, because so many Americans have been harmed by the healthcare system, because the victim was a CEO of a company millions of people blame for their suffering. This doesn't make Luigi right, but it makes the reaction more complex, more troubling, more revealing about the state of America. The Mangione case will likely inspire copycats. This is a grim but probable reality. When a political murder receives this much attention and support, when the killer becomes a folk hero, Others with similar grievances will consider similar actions. CEOs and corporate leaders will face increased security threats. Some may already be targets. There may be more attacks, more violence, and this escalation will force a reckoning. Either America addresses the underlying issues, the healthcare crisis, the inequality, the corporate power that leaves so many feeling helpless and exploited, or the violence will continue. Escalate, spread. This is not a prediction or advocacy. This is a warning. Systems that ignore suffering eventually face backlash. And that backlash can be ugly, can be violent, can spiral beyond anyone's control. Brian Thompson's death should not be celebrated. He was a human being. He had a family who loved him. His murder solved nothing, changed no policy, saved no lives. It was an act of violence that ended one life and destroyed another. Luigi Mangione will likely spend the rest of his life in prison, his brilliant mind wasted, his potential squandered, his family ashamed. This is tragedy, poor tragedy. No heroes here, no justice delivered, just 2 lives ruined, and a nation revealed as more fractured, more angry, more desperate than many wanted to admit. The real question is what comes next. Does America use this moment to examine its healthcare system, to address the legitimate grievances that drove some to cheer for a killer, to reform a system that leaves millions suffering? Or do we move on? Wait for the next outrage, the next murder, the next explosion of rage. The choice is. This has been the story of Luigi Mangione, the Ivy League graduate who murdered UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson in a targeted assassination on December 4, 2024, in Manhattan, in an act of violence that shocked. The story of a brilliant young man from privilege who threw away his life to kill someone he saw as a symbol of everything wrong with American healthcare. The story of a CEO who rose to the top of his industry but became a target of rage he may not have fully understood. The story of a murder that revealed deep fractures in American society, deep anger at systems that seem rigged against ordinary people, deep desperation when those systems fail, and the story of what happens next. Whether we learn from this tragedy, whether we reform the systems that created this rage, or whether we wait for the next Luigi Mangione, the next assassination, the next act of violence from someone who sees no other way. The choice is ours. The clock is ticking.